When people think of Disney, they automatically think of children because that's who Disney audience is supposed to be. Disney Studios is supposed to be targeted towards young viewers, and many children, including myself, grow up watching Disney Studios movies and idolizing these characters who they portray in their films. Young children everywhere, including myself, they grow up dressing up as these characters for Halloween or having birthday parties themed around these specific Disney characters. But what if Walt Disney Studios, one of the biggest film studios in the world, both underrepresents and misrepresents their female characters in their movies? That's what I'm investigating today. Hi, my name is Jess, and I was inspired to do this project because earlier this semester I went on a trip to Disney World, and prior to going, I went on a Disney movie marathon and watched a ton of different Disney movies. But while being in the class gender communication and watching these Disney movies at the same time, it made me realize how much issues there actually is between Disney and their portrayal of their female characters in their films. So that is what I am investigating today. I want to know how female characters in Disney films are portrayed and what issues their representation of these female characters can have on these young viewers and young minds who are so prone to easy influence. And so, as a little bit of background, Disney Studios is one of the biggest franchises in the world. They were first established in 1923, and from their beginning, they have grown to a net worth of over $181 billion. Now, Disney is one of the largest companies in the world. They are a part of the big six studios, so one of the major six studios producing film, movies, and TV. Now, they've gone to make countless movies and break countless box office records for their movies. And actually, Disney has over 150 Academy Awards under their belt for many different films and things that they've been a part of. And it's one of the biggest companies in the industry. They're a huge influence and have a very strong power. Now, moreover, Disney's typical audience is children. Their movies are categorized or targeted towards children and young families. If you look up Disney, it comes up as a children's film company. But is Disney really focusing its production, its films on the audience, on their audience members? Now, Disney is definitely not one of the best examples of gender equality within their films. Historically, they have underrepresented their female characters compared to the male characters within their films. Now, we can first talk about the ratio of male to female characters within their films. Now, as of today, the ratio of female to male characters in Disney films is 2 to 3. So for every 2 female characters, there are 3 male characters still as of 2026. So there are still a significant amount less female characters than there are male characters. But that ratio of 2 to 3 actually only became present in the early 2010s. Before that, the ratio was 1 to 3. So for every 1 female, there was 3 males represented within these films. And so you can imagine from the beginning to now, there is a significant amount more of male characters than female characters portrayed in these Disney films. And that's including lead roles and as well as side characters and even mascots, a part of Disney that aren't even portrayed in these films that are in their parks. There's a significantly amount more male than there are females represented. Now, One thing that I took my inspiration from one area would be Disney's Pixar movies specifically. I noticed through my Disney marathon that there was a huge underrepresentation of female characters within Disney Pixar films. If you think about it, it's actually very surprising how few Disney Pixar films have lead female characters or even meaningful female characters within their films. Finding Nemo and Finding Dory has Dory, but if you think about it, many of the other fish in that film are male.
It can cross the barriers of time.
Now, one area where I took my inspiration from would be Pixar, because during my Disney movie marathon, I realized how heavily underrepresented female characters are in these Pixar films. You don't really think about it if you're just watching, but many Pixar films are lead roles are males, especially you get in Pixar the two friend male character lead roles. We just saw Wood and Buzzy would
In our earliest days of Pixar,
I keep fucking up. I keep messing up. Now, one area where I took my inspiration from would be Pixar, because during my Disney movie marathon, I realized how heavily underrepresented female characters are in Pixar films. Many of the Pixar films feature male lead characters, especially the two male best friend lead characters, and even the side characters who are female are actually, they get barely even any lines. If you think about it, within the first two Toy Stories, besides Jessie, because Jessie was made a more of a lead role in Toy Story 2, but barely any other female characters speak. So Bo Peep and Mrs. Potato Head only have a few lines, and that's about it. Even when they go on their journey to save Woody in Toy Story 2, they don't even send any of these female characters. It's only all male characters who go. Now, in Pixar film, many of them do not pass the Bechdel test, such as Toy Story 1 and 2. Both Monsters, Inc., as well as A Bug's Life, Ratatouille, Finding Nemo, and even more of the newer Pixar films, which was surprising, such as Luca, which just came out in 2020, and that does not pass the Bechdel test as well. Now, the Bechdel test can help to test like gender equality within films, and it simply tests if two of the female characters within the film could have just a conversation with about anything else with each other besides about another man in the film. And so that is the Bechdel test, and unfortunately, many Pixar films do not actually pass the Bechdel test. Now, when it came to my research for Disney films, it was actually much easier to identify Disney films that passed the Bechdel test than Disney films that did not pass the Bechdel test. And I am no expert, but from my research, I was only able to identify 23 Disney movies that passed the Bechdel test. And this is still becoming an issue to this day. Again, with their new movie Luca that was released less than 10 years ago, that did not pass the Bechdel test. Now, the underrepresentation of women in Disney films has always been apparent and is very damaging to young girls, showing them that they're incapable, that men are more capable of being the strong leaders or having the best jobs, being the superheroes. But besides the underrepresentation of females in their films, we also have the double issue of the misrepresentation of female characters within their films. Now, when watching countless Disney movies, as well as reflecting back on my own knowledge of Disney, you can find many issues within these films of the portrayal of their female characters. Now, because for the sake of this project, I did decide to only focus on two, and that would be the objectification of female characters in Disney films, as well as the damaging stereotypes portrayed in Disney films on these female characters. Now, we can first start with objectification. Now, objectification is when a woman is passive or subject to visual consumption. So it's seeing her body as an object instead of being a part of her, instead of her being a human being. And the idea of objectification is very damaging for the representation of women because it paints them as objects instead of being intelligent, capable individuals. Now, the objectification of these females can also lead to dehumanization, and it allows for things such as violence as well as reduced social engagement within communities. If females are seeing these films, they are going to start to get self-conscious about themselves, and that's going to start to impact their everyday life, their social life, their education, everything. Now, unfortunately, for these young viewers, you can find many examples of objectification of female characters, and we're going to go right into it and take a look at a few of them. Now, when it comes to objectification, it's important to first talk about the damaging body stereotypes that Disney puts within these films. And so Disney historically has always portrayed their female characters to be what would be considered the ideal or attractive body type. And so that would be the skinny hips, skinny arms, skinny long legs, as you can see here from these examples. But you also get the big eyes and the very flowy hair in these characters as well. You don't get many Disney characters that are different than this, that are just the typical super skinny. Even you see it really here with Ariel and Jasmine, that there's very little body fat on these characters whatsoever. And this is teaching young girls what girls should look like. And so this is how you're going to get your Prince Charming. Another strong example of objectification of these Disney films would be the moment when Ariel is willing to give up her voice to Ursula in order to get her legs and go to the human world to be with Eric. Now, this is a really big issue and a big, strong example of objectification because it's showing that females can give up virtually anything, even their voice, if that means to be with the man. Now, it's teaching women to be passive and silent, obviously. I mean, it's removing Ariel's voice and saying, you want to be with this man? Sure, go ahead. You don't have to talk. It's so the storyline is actually pretty ridiculous if you think about it. But by Ariel stripping away her voice, it's stripping away her identity. It's helping her be viewed as more of a visual object than something than an individual, than a human being that's important and valuable and can have strong opinions and a strong voice to use. Another good example of objectification in Disney movies is the scene where Jasmine flirts with Jafar to distract him while Aladdin swooping in to save the day.
Pardon, there's some quid pro quo. Don't talk back to me, you big blue lout! You! Room 2 was I order you.
Jafar. I never realized how incredibly handsome you are.
That's better. Now, tell me more about myself.
You're tall, dark, well dressed.
So there's the scene where Jasmine flirts with Jafar to distract him. And as you can see in that scene, the second that Jasmine started speaking in a flirtatious manner and started swaying her hips back and forth, Jafar fell straight for it and was immediately distracted by Jasmine. Now, this is a cut clear sign of objectification in Disney movies. The This scene causes Jasmine to use her body instead of maybe her being able to talk her way or even fight her way out of the issue. And so, pretty much just flat out saying women are only good for their bodies. You know, they can't get their way out of these situations by speaking intelligently or by being strong and getting it out by fighting. And now that we've gone over some examples of objectification on female characters in Disney films, we can now go on to my final point of the damaging female stereotypes that you can find portrayed on female characters in Disney films. So let's look at some of those examples right now. One of the first damaging stereotypes that we can see a lot throughout many Disney movies, but especially Disney princess movies, would be the desperation for love narrative. And so this is that the second that a man gives almost always the princess, but gives the princess just a little bit of attention, she's going to fall madly in love with him, of course, because why not? So one of the best examples of this would be in the movie Frozen, when Anna falls in love with Hans after knowing him for probably about 3 hours. So here's that example.
So much more with you. Can I see something crazy? Will you marry me?
Can I see something even crazier? Yes.
Now, I couldn't be doing this project without discussing the damsel in distress narrative. Now, this narrative is that these female characters are vulnerable and weak and that they're always in need of saving, and this is very common throughout almost all Disney movies, very specifically Disney princess movies. So you see it in many of the classic Disney princess movies. So Snow White, Cinderella, Sleeping Beauty, they all follow the damsel in distress narrative that these women are always just waiting for their Prince Charming or their knight in shining armor to come and save them. But what I want to make apparent in this project is that this storyline is also not as noticeable, but still prevalent in other Disney movies as well, not just Disney princess movies. And so the damsel in distress narrative can be seen in movies such as Hercules with the character Meg, where Meg is trapped by Hades and Hercules has to save her Hercules has to save her for her to, well, has to kill Hades for her to be saved. But another example is Wendy in Peter Pan.
Captain, no splash.
Not a sound.
Not a bloomin' ripple.
It's a jinx. That's what it is.
No splash. No sign of the rain. Did you hear a splash?
And so this here is another classic example of the damsel in distress narrative, Wendy and the Lost Boys, but in particular Wendy, who that whole scene is made for, it cannot be saved. She was literally going to die. She was going to drown in the ocean if it wasn't for Peter Pan himself for swooping in and saving her. This narrative is very common throughout many Disney films. Some other classic examples would be Oliver and Company with Jenny or The Rescuers. And now finally, a really common example of these typical women stereotypes portrayed in Disney films would be the women being domestic trope. Now, this trope is that women belong in the kitchen or belong to be mothers or carers, and that's pretty much what they're for. They don't really need to be more independent or go get a job and be successful on their own. They're meant to take care of the home and the children while the husband is away making the money. And so this trope is, as you can imagine, very common throughout the theme of Disney movies. You can think of Cinderella. She is a housemaid until a man actually comes and rescues her, as well as you can think of Snow White. The second that she gets into the seven dwarfs' little cabin, she immediately starts cleaning up for them and cooking dinner for them. And so those are two classic examples of women needing to be domestic, that stereotype being portrayed in Disney films. And now we'll look at an example. This example is Whistle While You Work in Snow White. As I was talking about earlier, the second that she gets into the Seven Dwarfs' home, she immediately starts cleaning up and singing this song.
Now you wash the dishes. You tidy up the room. You clean the fireplace. And I'll use the broom. While you work, and cheerfully together we can tidy up the place.
So as you can see, Snow White immediately takes off cleaning the whole house for them. They go through the kitchen, the hallways and stairs, living room, and even bedrooms, and cleans up the whole place for these men who she doesn't even know. She's never met them. She doesn't know what they look like or anything. She's waiting for them to come home. So another classic example of women needing to be domestic. Now, again, these are classic examples, and the princess movies are easy to look at and find flaws in. But again, I do want to make it prevalent that this trope can be seen throughout many other Disney movies besides just princess movies. And so one example would be Lady and the Tramp. Lady lives this life of luxury, and she's this pampered, pretty queen almost, and Tramp is the one living on the streets, the rough dog. And another example would be Mary Poppins. Mary Poppins comes in when this family is in desperate need for help, and she literally swoops in and saves them and becomes these children's mother pretty much just immediately like that. And so Mary Poppins is another classic example of women needing to be domestic trope. Now, Disney's utilization of underrepresentation, objectification, and these damaging female stereotypes are very prevalent throughout almost all of these Disney movies. And that brings me to where I come now, which is, how do these examples and these idols, these characters that children are looking up to, how are these impacting the young viewers watching their movies? What are these messages teaching these young girls, and how can it affect them in their future as they're growing up. They're very vulnerable at this age to suggestion, and so what lasting impacts does it have on these young girls? And so these were all further questions that I had that I wanted to investigate for this project. Now, it would be valuable to first discuss the idea of social learning theory. Now, social learning theory is that individuals, but especially children, will learn emotions, behaviors, and attitudes by observing or imitating role models, including images on media. And so this can help to further explain the damages that these can cause to these young viewers. Them seeing things like these princesses objectifying their bodies is teaching them that that's what's socially acceptable, that that's how it should be. And another example of the women being domestic trope, that girls should be domestic, that they should be the housewives and be the caregivers and be second to the man. And this further goes to show how damaging these stories can be to the young viewers watching. On top of that, these behaviors and traits, they're going to start to push over into their day life. And so young girls will start to see themselves as submissive or less ambitious because these are what those role models are showing them. And this just further shines light on the issues and the damages that Disney can be causing on these young viewers. First, we can discuss the issue of the underrepresentation of females in Disney films. Now, with the lack of heroes and idols in these films, as well as just lead female characters in general, these are teaching these girls that they're incapable of being in these roles. This can cause girls to have gender barriers and biases, as well as it can cause low self-esteem. They don't understand why. It's kind of like they're fighting with themselves because they might feel that they want to be this way, but these are how these idols, these heroes of theirs, are being portrayed in these films as domestic and as obedient and submissive. And so it's discouraging. It's discouraging of the possibilities that these girls are open to, and it limits leadership opportunities for them. They're not going to feel like they can be the captain of a sports team because girls don't do that. You know, they can't go play football. Girls don't do that. And so that's what these movies are teaching these young girls. Girls and women often will face gender barriers, such as the unequal opportunity in the workforce, and these movies having an underrepresentation of female characters is just further showing that this is okay because this is happening in film. So it's just further justifying the issue at hand. If we want an equal representation of women per se in the workforce, then what we should be doing is representing that in our media platforms as well, especially to these young generations who are going to be the next ones up in line to take a stand and to make a change in this world. Now, the underrepresentation also pushes for low self-esteem in young girls. It's showing that there's little to no empowerment moments for these female characters in these films. It's portraying women as more maids and housewives again, and needing to be rescued, that they're not strong enough to save themselves. And so because of all of this, it can result in them feeling low self-esteem again if they feel like they're missing out on more, or if they just feel like that's not who they want to be. They don't want to be a housewife, but this is how these storylines are being told. And so there's the lack of strong female characters, especially strong female leader characters in these films, can lead to low self-esteem as well. These young girls may not feel like they're even capable of being a leader, again, of being the captain, or even being a leader in a workplace setting, or just leading in a conversation, because this isn't what's typically portrayed for them in social learning theory. They're learning from these media platforms. And finally, the issue we can discuss would be the final issue that we can discuss within the underrepresentation of female characters would be the potential lack of leadership positions for these women. Now, they already feel like they're underrepresented in leadership roles by these movies, and I mean, in our world today, in our society, and these movies are just furthermore enforcing these behaviors. Now, we need to be portraying these leaders in our films as females, as strong, empowering women, to further help show in society that this is normal, that that girls can be leaders too, and can be just as strong and just as intelligent as a man. And so you see very few leaders in Disney films. In The Lion King, it's Mufasa and Simba. In Big Hero 6, it's Baymax and Hero. And so there's not many Disney films that have strong lead females to begin with. And therefore, when there's typically a male counterpart as like there's two leaders, it's never just one female who's able to lead herself. And so it's important to also show these leadership opportunities for these women, to show it to our society, to normalize more. But that's just some of the issues, just the tip of the iceberg for the underrepresentation of females in Disney films. Next, we should address the issue of objectification of these female characters. Now, starting with the body types, these body types portrayed on these, especially princesses, are very unrealistic body types that would be near impossible for any woman to achieve, probably impossible for any woman to achieve. And so this is going to be very damaging to young viewers watching. They're going to wonder why their body doesn't look the way of the attractive princess. And it can also lead to low self-esteem, as well as other major mental health issues that can also result in physical issues and physical harm as well. Now, these girls are they're gonna wonder why their body isn't what would be the ideal body that is portrayed in media, the unrealistic ideal body that's portrayed. And so they are going to start to assess themselves and assert their worth and their ability as to their appearance. So if they're not confident in their own body, if they're not confident in their own skin, they're not going to carry themselves with confidence and poise as they should be doing. On top of that, again, we have the issues of the objectification within the storylines. So Jasmine flirting with Jafar, or Jasmine flirting with Jafar, that's setting damaging ideas for our young viewers to show that their bodies are objects and that they're tools and that they can be used to take advantage, and they're less than human. On top of that, we see this again with the storyline of Ariel being willing to give up her voice for Eric, showing that there's no length to go to be with a man, pretty much, and that a girl should be willing to go through anything, give up anything, including her voice, in order to be with the man. And so the objectification too is further teaching these young girls very damaging ideas that can have lasting impacts on their entire lives. And finally, we have the damaging stereotypes put on these Disney females. And so the first one being the desperation for love. This is portraying to girls that their entire worth is to be in love and to find a man. And so it's saying that, if it doesn't matter what career you have or if you're able to afford to get yourself your first home or pay yourself through college even, that doesn't matter if you're not with the man. So that's what, and it's teaching these young girls to have low standards, to fall in love with the first man who gives them attention, even though they may be like a villain in the movie. Like, it doesn't matter because it's the first man that gave them attention. On top of that, we have the damsel in distress narrative, which is also very damaging. It's portraying women as weak and incapable of helping and saving themselves, which is that's going to continue to harm children. Again, social learning theory, it's going to continue to harm them throughout their entire adulthood as well. We have to be showing these young girls that they can be strong, confident leaders, that they can take care of themselves, that they can get themselves out of sticky situations with their intelligent brains and their strong muscles, and not from somebody else swooping in and saving the day. And finally, there's the women being domestic trope, which is portrayed heavily throughout Disney films on female characters as well. This is further damaging. It's teaching young girls that they're unable to work towards and achieve their goals. It's saying that they belong as caretakers and in the kitchen as mothers, instead of being strong, independent women, chasing their dreams and chasing their careers, making a life for themselves, setting the path for themselves. And it's very damaging. It's teaching these young girls everywhere to confide, to not reach their full potential, because they think that this is how it should be, that women belong in the kitchen. And young girls are going to see Snow White cleaning up the cabin, and they're going to think, oh, if Snow White cleans up the cabin, I clean up the cabin. Not Snow White is going and getting rid of the evil queen herself. And so that's a further issue within Disney films and the portrayal of their female characters. All three of these stereotypes are very damaging to young vulnerable ears, and we have to be willing to switch up these films in order to see a difference in our society, how society portrays women in general, and seeing the next generation take a stand and change what's taught in our world today. Instead, we should be portraying these females as strong leaders, as independent and capable women who are able to take care of themselves, stand up for themselves, demand a spot at the table. And this is going to teach them to never be dismissed. It can help to change and scope our whole society, because if we're teaching these next generations, these young girls and boys everywhere, that gender is equal, that we do have gender equality in our society, then they're not going to know anything different, and that's how they're going to go about everyday life. They're never going to look at any girl as less than a man in any form. Walt Disney Studios, as of today, preaches to its fans and its audience that they're empowering, that they have motivative storylines, and that they promote healthy growth for these young viewers. But from what I've been able to find, they're only damaging their young female audience, and they're not allowing these young, vulnerable audience members to reach their full potential of what they're actually capable of doing in our world. And so we need to begin to portray these females in a much better light. We need to portray them as leaders, as strong, capable young women, so that girls everywhere never doubt their capability and they are never going to question their worth or their ability in our society. Thank you all.